Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews. My name is Jillian Robinson. I'm the Associate Artistic Producer here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre, and today I am joined by the cool guy, Mr. Ryan Borochovitz, one of our co-artistic producers. How you doing? Cool guy.
It's the first time in my life anyone's called me a cool guy, so I guess I'm doing great.
Listen, I feel like I'm always like the wonderful, the amazing, but I'm like, you know what? We're in a cool vibe.
Yeah.
Cool guy. Hi. How's it going?
You're cool too, Jillian Robinson. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Today, Ryan and I are going to be talking about a couple of cool pieces that are kind of combined together under the title Genrefuck. So Genrefuck consists of two solo pieces, Never Walk Alone by Julie Phan and Reina by Augusto. These pieces are happening at Buddies and Bad Times Theatre, and it is a Buddy and Bad Times Theatre production, but co-prod in partnership with Fugen Theatre, P.A.N, and Pencil Kit Productions. This sort of Genrefuck package of performances is happening May 21st to the 31st at Buddies and Bad Times. So that's what we're talking about today. But prior to that, what are our cool drinks that we're drinking today, Ryan?
I have a warm drink today, actually.
Nice.
I have just kind of orange pico tea, sort of a usual standby go-to for me. I have it in the cup. I guess that's kind of cool. Yeah, it has our logo on it. How about that?
A big C.
How about you?
Yes.
What's in your cup today?
So mine was a warm drink, but it is a bit cooled down now. Prior to this recording, I supervise at a brunch restaurant, so I had a bit of a busy day today, and I poured myself some leftover coffee with some chocolate milk. So it's kind of like a warm, caffeinated boost at the end of the day, much needed. And I also have my big bottle of water because hydration station, as per usual. So how this episode's going to work, Ryan and I will devote time to each show. So Never Walk Alone and Reina will have their own little sections, but we do want to chit chat about sort of Genrefuck at large. Ryan, do you want to kind of open us up with that? What was Genrefuck?
What the fuck is going on with these genres?
Also, definitely we are exceeding our how many swear words in this episode, okay? Because we get a hall pass because of the title. So
yeah, if we just had to say like genre F, genre fudge, no, not for this one. So what is all the Genrefuckery about? So Genrefuck is, as you indicated, a series of two solo shows, and it is actually the final show of this year's Buddies and Bad Times season. Mm-hmm. And I think, I struggle with what exactly to make of Genrefuck, and maybe that's the point, that they're putting various things in the blender, throwing at the wall, defying structure, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But aside from the fact that they are both indeed solo shows, I guess I wonder what is the through line that justifies putting these two pieces together, and especially having this be almost the last statement of this season, which was notably Ted Witzel's inaugural season as artistic director, stewarding Buddies and Bad Times. We also did just come off another solo show where they did Shedding a Skin, and ironically, that piece was kind of similar in some of its content to the piece right before it, There Is Violence, Born Again Crow. And I wonder, is there like a bit of a kind of like daisy chain of each piece sort of riffs off the previous one, or is that entirely unintentional in the curation and it's just a scheduling thing of when each thing was able to go up? Who could say? Mm-hmm. But in terms of what Genrefuck itself is, it is just two, I would argue, standalone solo shows that kind of have very little in common with each other. I think both of them kind of think that they are subverting genre more than I would say they actually are. They're definitely not traditional in any sense. I think, that's maybe a lot more apt a description of Reina than Never Walk Alone, which we'll get into more as we talk about both. But they are very much trying to blend or hybridize different forms of theater, and the extent to which that is itself a transgressive act of firm boundaries of genre, I think varies on a case-by-case basis with the two shows. In both cases, I think there is a roughness around the edges in terms of these pieces. Neither of them feels like they are as presented in the series in their final state of development. I think there is more work that could be done with them, and probably will be if they have afterlives beyond the series. And maybe in that spirit, the genre fuckery of it all has more to do with treating these as rough, unfinished playwriting exercises rather than finished products. I don't know if that was the stated goal. It doesn't say anything about that in the marketing copy of the piece. But I would say both shows very much have a feel of throwing a lot against the wall and seeing what sticks. And in that way, yeah, exercise in writing, I think, is a way of breaking yourself out of a standard beginning, middle, and end story and what makes the most linear narrative sense. But I do think that both stories, or one more so than the other, and we'll get to that again soon, maybe have more potential to be refined in that way, whereas the other one perhaps maybe exists more in this carnivalesque space of we are just fucking with genre and seeing what happens. I have another big thought about it, but I've been talking for a bit. Do you want to say anything about genre fuck of it all?
Sure. I just kind of want to break down like genre and fuck. Like, I feel like you're right. Like, both pieces are, I guess, no pun intended, because they both, this isn't spoiler, but they both involve an element of performative dance qualities. The genre of each piece is sort of, yeah, it's theater, but for instance, our first piece, or again, I don't want to get into too much, but like, to me, I got like performance art aspects alongside theater. And then our second piece was like pole dancing aspects alongside theater. So again, this like, yeah, what is this sort of blender of we're in a theater, we're in a theatrical realm, but we're actually, this is the style of performance we're doing. And then both pieces have to do with like fuck, with with like sexuality, with self. Both pieces have a very high caliber of physicality and, you know, in some ways, a viscerality of body. And I think that, again, like genre and fuck and those, again, that sort of pulse is present in both pieces, which again, we could probably get further into when we get into each piece individually. And then, you know, it's Buddies in Bad Times as well. So we know that that company highlights the queer community and also like sexuality on blast as well, like advocates of that. And I feel like, again, both pieces sort of being in the container of Buddies in Bad Times theater, like they could go there and as far as they want to go there. So like, I think just in the scheme of, you know, the average theater goer, like genre fuck, like you're gonna get a meaty version of genre tonight. Like that's another sort of like read on that is what I took away from.
What you're bringing to my attention is that maybe you and I are more accustomed to things that fuck with genre than your average theater goer. Fair. Although I question to what extent your average theater goer who is unaccustomed to these things will go to Buddies in Bad Times, period, let alone to see something as their first show at that venue titled Genrefuck.
Yeah.
Unless, I don't know, like it seems like it's perhaps there's an element of choir preaching and that particular choir being already, I don't want to quite say numb, but a little desensitized to the radicalism that I think these plays are putting on display. The other big thought that I wanted to say about Genrefuck, and you kind of, I think, alluded to this slightly, and the reason why I didn't want to start with this is because it actually wasn't my idea. That I attended this show with a smarter and more second language literate critic than myself, who pointed out that in French, genre is the word for both genre, like literary genres, and gender.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that, and I'm like, oh, that's probably a good point. So it's fucking not just with the concept of literary or theatrical genres or performance genres as we might interpret them, but very much gender is the through line between these two. You mentioned sexuality, and that's certainly a big part of how gender is performed in these pieces. It is just as much fucking with gender, and I think that is certainly a through line that does exist between both pieces.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I kind of want to just maybe tug at here is I wonder how these two pieces were curated. Did maybe, and I don't know how Ted's programming decisions come about, but was he like looking for works to put in his season, found these two that were in development or too short to get their own slot and thought, well, they're both solo pieces, so I can put them together, and Genrefuck is the title he came up with for that combination? Or was there like I want to do a series of two solo shows called Genrefuck because they'll fuck with genre, who has ideas for what these could be? You got one, Genrefuck. And I think the latter would maybe explain why I feel like, is this the most appropriate banner for these two pieces? Because if it was the former, then that means that the banner came organically from the pieces themselves, and I'm not sure I'm seeing that as much. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I just have, not necessarily directly, but another thing just popped in my brain of, if this was like Ted's baby of I want something called Genrefuck, and the fact that it's two solo shows sold on the same bill back to back, that is fucking with genre. You're going to see a solo show. It's usually one show, one performer, you're done. Okay, whereas this is a night of two solo shows back to back, strung under the same umbrella. It's not like this was projected as a festival where you're seeing different shows. It's literally under the same banner. So that just, I don't know, that just cracked open for me too.
Yeah, that's something.
The fact that these shows aren't directly related, like obviously through our discussion today, we'll be talking about the nature of just seeing them back to back. There's probably similarities that we'll pull on or, unpack synonymously. But all in all, they were kind of two separate shows, but yet baked under the same banner. So that alone to me is like a bit of a genre fuck. You go to see a solo show, but these are actually two separate solo shows, two performers.
And I believe that they were selling tickets that you could see like both of them together or just one or the other. And like, I feel like it's a very different experience if you do only see one, that you aren't quite experiencing it as genre fuck. You are just seeing Reina or just seeing Never Walk Alone. Sure. And there is something curational, I feel like is a term I keep coming back to, but about putting them together and seeing what kind of generative discussions might come out of putting these two pieces in dialogue. Before we do the opposite of that and talk about them in isolation, do you have any kind of general appraisal about just genre fuck as a dual experience itself that we might want to share with people before we talk about the individual pieces?
Yeah, I want to definitely share a little bit about that. And then I do kind of want to just let our audiences know about the cool, fun additions that we were gifted on opening night. Seeing this, like you said, you could purchase each show individually and go for it. And I think each show deserves a ticket on their own, but doing it in combination and experiencing, because they do have to turn over the space. So there is quite a chunk of intermission time between each show. So giving yourself that breather space and doing a doubleheader and experiencing genre fuck as a whole, I think is necessary. Like, and I think when we get into each individual sort of aspect of it, you'll be able to sort of compare and contrast with each piece, similar to kind of what you were saying earlier of like, these are like new or works that are sort of like placed on the stage for the first time and sort of messing with things. And I think it's a very interesting experience, something different than, again, if you're like a standard theater goer, you're not going to really catch shows like this, at like a bigger theater house, like a Mervish or something, right? Again, I am always an advocate for buddies. Like they go there. Like I remember LOL, when I did my general audition for them, I specifically said to Ted, I was like, the fact that this is a company that always, always goes to the viscerality and the messiness and like the crux of what makes us human, what makes us sexual beings, what makes us our gender, and performs that with a capital P. So I feel like both of these pieces definitely did that. And again, the beauty of being able to see them back to back and in this sort of package creates like an even more layered sort of debrief. Yeah. I don't know if you want to jump on that or if you have anything to say in particular about it at large.
That works. Like I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would encourage people to check this out. They're weird. I think I didn't like. Yeah, I would say I did like one of the shows more than the other, but that's just the nature of seeing two things and having opinions. But I don't know if I would therefore say you should just see one. Yeah. Because I think there is something interesting about the package, even if I'm still sort of chewing on what that interesting thing is.
So speaking of chewing on, I do want to mention opening night. Buddies graced us with some lovely hors d'oeuvres to kind of start the evening off, which was super neat. And then in the intermission moments between shows, we had a bunch of like Venezuelan food also given to us. I can't remember the name of the catering service offhand, but it was
write it down.
super tasty. And I will be ordering from them again. I'm going to look that up later. Super lovely. Like we were gifted these little hors d'oeuvres. We were gifted some food in between. We were also gifted some lovely drag performances in between the shows. I don't know if that's going to be consistently happening throughout the run, but it definitely was a lovely sort of added sparkle element to opening night. That's the beauty of Buddies in Bad Times, right? They have the cabaret space and they have the chamber space. So there's always something going on. So I just wanted to share that with our listeners and viewers and thank Buddies for adding that little accoutrement to kind of fill our bellies as we filled our minds with these shows that we will now dive into individually. Yeah? Do you have anything to add?
No, let's do it.
Okay, first up was Reina by Augusto Bitter. So Ryan, do you want to kind of give us your standard synopsis and then we will go on that journey?
Yeah, so of the two pieces, this is the one that I think fucks with genre more deliberately or pointedly, and that will make it difficult to describe, but very short version. It is about I believe, Venezuelan woman named Reina, who is played by Jamie Lujan, who is not the writer of the piece. It is written by Augusto Bitter, who's also an actor who I've seen before. So when Jamie showed up, I'm like, that's not, I'm confused. Is this the right piece or have we gone to the other? It was just like a funny moment of my brain calibrating to, it's so rare for these types of solo shows to not be performed by their authors, especially when their authors are also actors. So that already, it doesn't quite fuck with the form of solo show because that's not like an inherent rule, but it is a rare break with convention that I thought was interesting. Reina is ostensibly the woman on a bag of corn flour. I guess a very well-known brand of corn flour. I have it written here, Harina P.A.N. And I'm not familiar with it. I don't cook with corn flour, but I imagine if you do, and particularly if you make a lot of South American cooking, this is probably a very well-known, iconic image that you are very familiar with. Perhaps think like the Robin Hood guy on more North American flour brand. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of a useful frame of reference here. But it's
or like the Green Giant
the
on
Green
like
Giant,
the Green Giant.
Sun-Made Raisin Lady, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So brand mascot. And kind of just imagines her many lives of who this woman could be, what she would want from life, what it would be like to be her. A recurring refrain throughout the pieces, in one lifetime I was blank, and she just imagines this version of herself, or their self, because I guess gender is performed interestingly. So we have a certainly male presenting performer. I don't know how Jamie identifies personally. I don't know if you do.
There is in here him.
Yeah, so we have a male performer putting on what is essentially a drag performance as this brand mascot for this brand of corn flour. And it is essentially, I don't quite want to say like sketch comedy, maybe vignettes is a better word for what it is, but it's essentially Reina just doing stuff and imagining her different lives. She makes arepas. There's a lot of fun audience interaction where she gives them the corn flour dough to knead in their hands and put into shapes. And then she puts some of them on her chest and puts others into like a George Foreman grill that we smell cooking over the course of the rest of the performance. There's a banana suspended from a string where she's trying to grab. I could keep going over and over again. Everything I've said so far is really just like in the first like 10 minutes of it. So I don't really feel like it constitutes spoilers yet. And I would be reluctant to even say that you could spoil a show like this, but it is just...
I was just thinking that. I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna... Okay, sure.
Do we need a spoiler shield for this?
I feel like we probably don't need spoiler shields for these.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. With both of these shows, again, like we're gonna get to Never Walk Alone in a moment, but the content of them, because they're both such narration pieces, it's impossible for us to sort of like spoil the content because like, again, each of them are a journey. So I think if we just talk about, the flavor of things, no pun intended, and the production elements, that's all we need to do.
Yeah. So, and as far as just like a small description goes, we could kind of end it there.
Yeah.
There's obviously more we could say about this, as we will continue to do, but what were your thoughts? Anything you'd like to add to a general description before we get into appraisals of the piece?
Oh, I think general descriptions are great. I would love to talk about Jamie's performance and also some production elements. So, should we start with Jamie, or do you want to start with production elements?
Start with Jamie.
Okay. Jamie was in 4th year at Theater and Drama Studies, my alumni when I was in 1st year. So, hello, Jamie. Lovely to chit chat about your performance today. Jamie is also a phenomenal drag performer and like makes his own costumes and everything. So, I know that there is like such a professional, like elevated physicality that Jamie brings to like all of his work. I just want to like totally shout out and tip the hat to Reina, like his portrayal of Reina, because there's just such a his whole body is like, whether it's like jumping around, dancing around, which is like a huge heartbeat element for Reina, whether it's the sort of contortion of self, trying to, as like the piece sort of navigates gender and identity and what that is, and the sort of pace and moving through molasses, or like the pouring of the sort of cornmeal, I felt like rippled through his body, especially like there's the moments when he like approaches the banana, and like how each footprint onto the stage is done in such like a stoic and sustained way. I just feel like Jamie's always had such a great handle on physical self and sort of like the leaning back, the sort of awkward static positions and tableau elements that Jamie brought into this piece make the audience sort of see a picture of this woman in whatever state that she's in. Really was like super high caliber for me. And so again, I wanted to get that out about Jamie. Do you want to add anything else about?
I would definitely agree with everything you're saying about that. And the thing that I thought was most compelling about this piece, and this I think fits both into Augusto's conception of it and Jamie's performance of it. Maybe this is some of how it's fucking with genre a bit. Again, I keep coming back to what is the genre fuck of it all.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like there was a disconnect between the silent, almost dance-like physical theater moments and the more narrational, hi, I'm Reina, I'm talking to the audience. The latter felt very much almost like stand-up comedy, or maybe even like drag performance in that way, or elements of drag performance, because I know drag encompasses a lot of things that include like dance and singing and lip syncing. But I think those physical moments, those felt like a modern dance piece, maybe even mime. They had there was very much an element of the performance art. Like, I think one of the most compelling images was he was underneath the table trying to climb atop it. And then when he gets to the top of the table, he's trying to fit himself into the flour bag in like one element or one arm and just can't fit. Those were just so striking. Like, I could watch a whole silent dance show of him doing those types of things to the point where it started with him reaching for this banana that was just out of reach and couldn't quite get to it. That I was expecting there to be a linear progression through the show of, get that damn banana. That's your goal, Reina. That represents femininity. Who knows what the banana represents?
Or masculinity.
That's why I kind of quotation marked it, because what is the banana to Reina? But then what I thought was kind of interesting is the second time that Reina, the character, engaged with this banana, just took the chair onto her back, put it down, climbed up and got it.
And peeled, but didn't grab the banana. Peeled it, because couldn't get it off, but peeled it and ate it instead.
And that's what I also thought was interesting, because we're presented with the banana as obstacle of, gotta get this thing, can't get it. And then we are presented with the solution, climb on chair, get banana, but then can't quite get it off the hook. And I thought, okay, more obstacle, but then no, peel it, got it.
If that's not a woman trying to climb her way to the top of a patriarchal system image, I don't know what is. It's like, I'm going to carry this heavy chair on my back, place the chair, stand on the chair, risk the chair maybe breaking, trying to fiddle with the banana, trying my darndest to get this banana off. It's not working. Alternative solution, I'm just going to peel it back and then just stand on that chair and eat the
It's a good image, but in my mind, it was resolved too easily. The fact that it was basically in the first third of the show, after only 2 attempts. There you go, got it. I agree that there is an element of struggle to achieving that success, but I might have liked to see that as more of a
Sure.
recurring plot point throughout the piece. But then maybe that's me trying to impose Freytag pyramid logic onto a piece that's trying
Yes.
not to.
Which
Yeah.
exactly. And I think this is a beautiful bleed into production elements because, again, yes, the Freytag pyramid of like masculine standardity of beginning, middle, end play. This absolutely is not that. This is like Carol Churchill would be like, yes, with a big
Modeled after the
thumbs up.
female orgasm, not the male
Model
orgasm.
after the female orgasm. And also, it was done obviously like alleyway because, well, not obviously because the other piece was proscenium. We were sit in alleyway, but Reina was in the round and it also was like a cycle. So again, to me, it was like the female like cycle circles kind of has to do with femininity and the femaleness as well. And I think even the patterns kind of touching back on Jamie's performance too, like the circular motions, the sort of breaking the fourth wall. Like there was a lot of talk about genrefuck. There was a lot of like play structure fuckery with this, right? It like performance art. I think that's why that keeps coming up as well, because a lot of it was just, moments where you could just watch and live in it as opposed to make sense of what's going on. I'm kind of leapfrogging to the production elements. Is that
please.
fine?
Yeah, go for it.
So the circle that was sort of set up was like a bunch of different kitchen paraphernalia, like in Reina's kitchen, is kind of what my brain
I think
went
that's exactly
to.
what they were. There was like rolling pins and pots and
rolling pins. There was, some like wipes. There was like a Lysol bottle. There was the cornmeal bag, and every piece, like every prop was like a hue of yellow. So I feel like that really encased the whole flavor again of the piece, and that captivated me the minute I walked into the space. That before I even went to my seat, I kind of just allowed myself to kind of look at the space and individually take in each prop and each element. And Reina pretty much almost interacts with all of them, but again, it kind of created like this lovely little like home circular base,
an ovum perhaps.
Absolutely, yes, with a working sort of arepa maker.
Well, I think it was just like a George Foreman grill. It was like it closed down like that. Whether or not it was brand name doesn't matter, but
which that added exactly. It added that scent element, which we'll also talk about. Never Walk Alone. There's a scent element there too. I feel like some theater pieces are doing that now, adding the element of like smell to and it. I am so attuned to like sense memory. Like if I smell a certain thing, I remember something, or it does draw me closer into something. And anyways, I just feel like that happened with Red, the smell of like the cigarettes with that show that we talked about on the Cup as well. And so this one, like Jamie pops some of the audience padded arepas into our George Foreman grill, and the smell of that engulfs our nose as we're sort of taking in the piece too, which I thought was a lovely production element there. So Augusto Bitter and Claren Groves, alongside being co-directors, they were also co-scenic designers. So lovely too that, yes, when you have the director that is also scenic designer, both what you have as your vision in your head and also the tangible vision on the stage, definitely were married well there.
And I think that's an indication of the fact that this isn't something like, okay, I have an idea for a piece and designer go off and figure out what it looks like. Like it is part of the actual, this is what the piece is. This cannot exist without a circle of these particular items. We need an awful lot of corn flour that's going to make a big mess on the stage. We're going to see footprints. It is just, this is what that show is. And I think there's like an element of clownness to that. Of like feels like a big bag of or box of props, bag of tricks kind of thing. Like Monks comes to mind. I don't know if that's like a fair comparison, but I think that it has that type of make a mess, funny show, interesting subversions of gender kind of seems very fitting to that sort of thing.
Totally. And I just want to tip the hat also to associate lighting designer Nathan Bruce. There's a lot of poignant light moments in this piece that again are sewn right into the narration of the piece, and I felt they were really well executed, like the opening of a door, the peering through like a window spotlight through like a cabinet space when the lights go blackout and then come back on. I just feel like there was a specificity needed for light in this piece, and I thought the team, and Nathan included, executed that and augmented Jamie's performance in that beautifully.
Yeah
Do you want to add anything on the
Just
production side, or
one major production
else?
element that I feel like hasn't been brought up yet, but I think is worth mentioning is the sound and music in this piece. Composition was done by Y. Josephine and sound designer Mickey Rodriguez. There was like a lot of very interesting songs that I think were created. I assume that's Y. Josephine's domain here. I don't speak Spanish. I believe it was in Spanish, so I'm not quite sure what was being said, but like there was one funny song that was like about like Rachel Ray and Julia Child that you hear those proper names come up in this otherwise Spanish song, and like there's like fun dancing to it. I'm struggling to remember like all of the interesting sound pieces. I should have taken better notes to write kind of some of these down, but I think it was definitely part of the texture of the piece that is similarly like what you said with the lighting design, augments the initial conception to something that feels like a more Gesamtkunstwerk, total work of art. I don't know.
Yeah. Something that is just jumping out at me as we're sort of using the artist bios to kind of wade through both of these pieces. Sean Henry is just listed here as Genrefuck lighting designer. So I guess that's why Nathan Bruce is our associate lighting designer. So that's something cool as well. It seems like we have people working on the production side of the table under Genrefuck, like either has different roles in each of these shows or are sort of helming the whole what is Genrefuck. So that's neat there.
Okay. Any last thoughts you want to say about Reina before we move on to Never Walk Alone?
No, I think that's great. And I think this piece very easily could, because it has, not only because, but it does have a performance art element. I think it could be an installment in like something like the AGO, or it could be like, you know, in another black box space too. And I think it's a lovely, fun, informative, you know, it's juicy. It goes places as well. Like a lot of the we talked about this too, but the movements and the sort of like confrontation of femininity, of sexuality, of identity, I think were very like grotesquely and beautifully performed and elemented. And there's even, I guess this, I mean, it's not really spoilery because we already kind of unpacked a lot,
no
but
spoilers, it's fine.
Yeah, just like some of the, you know, some of the visual choreography moments were quite heavy too, and like personal, cultural. This piece definitely can have a life outside of Buddies, and I hope that it does.
I honestly feel like, and I don't know if this actually was the first time that both or either of these two Genrefuck pieces saw any kind of stage with an audience, but to me this feels like something, Reina specifically, that would have been like existing in a fringe festival and then gets said like, hey, that's kind of cool, do it at Buddies. But I don't, to my knowledge, I don't believe that this has been done anywhere before. I'm not sure if that is listed anywhere, and apologies if I'm speaking out of my whatever in terms of, you know, let's not be profane in this Genrefuck discussion. But yeah, like I think this is an interesting starting place for this journey. I can't imagine it. I don't want to say like going back to something like Fringe is like a step down from this point, because I don't really like thinking of these things hierarchically that way. I've seen plenty of shows at Fringe that are better than things I've seen at Mirvish, for example. But I wonder what the next step for a show like this after it's already been programmed in a main stage season at a large reputable company like Buddies. So I would be curious to see what that development is, but I like how it has that scrappy Fringe-like energy of experimentation, throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what can we do with this character? What can we make this character do? What would be compelling to see on stage? And it doesn't necessarily cohere into like an obvious or straightforward way.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Should we jump to Never Walk Alone?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So thank you, Reina. Pivoting, doing our little intermission to the next piece. So Never Walk Alone. Ryan, would you like to give us a little summary there, and then we'll jump in?
Yeah. So Never Walk Alone is the story of a female performer, a pole dancer at a strip club. Her name is Honey, or at least that's her stage name. We're not doing spoilers for this one either. Is that right?
No, I think we don't. Listen, we're fucking our own genre here at Cup of Hemlock. We're not doing spoilers for this episode. Boom, go.
We later find out her name is Iris. Spoilers. So, but we'll call her Honey for the sake of anonymity here. So, Honey is performing at this club in Montreal, and it is Christmas Eve, and she's working until 3 a.m. And it's kind of just the story, sort of her reflecting on her life, perhaps in a very Christmas Carol visited by three ghosts kind of way, but minus the ghosts. And it's sort of just, I'm reaching for that interpretation there, but, but it is Christmas Eve and she's just thinking about herself, how she got here, what she does for a living, does she like what she's doing, who does she have to deal with, what has she dealt with. There is an inciting incident where she gets a phone call from her mother who she hasn't spoken to in 6 years. And while that comes up certainly throughout the piece, I wouldn't say, I was reluctant to even bring that up in a description of what it's about, because I wouldn't say it's what it's about. It's not like, ooh, the story of a stripper reconnecting with her estranged mother. Like, it's not about that. It is very much I would say a much more conventional solo show than Reina is, where it is one person, main character, on stage the whole time, talking about their job, which is a very common theme for solo shows. Her job in this case happens to be as an exotic dancer in one of these clubs. And we do see a lot of actual pole dancing in the show. There are interludes of her doing it. And I think that is the extent to which it feels like it's, I will say, fucking with genre here, but to me, I think a lot of shows about certainly dancer characters typically do feature dance performance in them. And I wouldn't say that that is such a radical departure from whatever else this genre thinks it is. And it's certainly seeing it right after something like Reina that's just doing all kinds of stuff, putting all kinds of different types of performance into a blender. This one feels a lot more straightforward to me. I don't know. You look like you want to say something. Feel free.
Well, I just think because, like, I just think the act of like stripping and pole dancing, like that is its own performative state. Like, I'll say, like, I've been to strip clubs, and it's like,
I've never
go to the theater.
I'll be the first to say that.
Oh, great, perfect. You go to the theater and you go to a strip club. Like, to me, those are different. They're both performative aspects, but I've been an audience in both realms, and it's like, to me, like watching an exotic dancer do her or his thing is like a different type of performance than theater. So I even found me like watching this piece, it was interesting because it was like I was sitting in a theater, but then I felt like I was just like hanging out with friends at a strip club. And I was like, oh, whoa, this is like, it shouldn't be like a different audience take or experience, but I don't really have my theater brain on when I'm at a strip club, and vice versa. Strip club brain on when I'm watching a piece of theater. So that was like a cool sort of like subversion of watching for me, I guess.
I don't know. I guess that makes sense if you're thinking of it in terms of this is a type of dancing and performance that doesn't usually exist in this type of space or venue.
Because I also feel like, sorry, just to add
please.
I feel like obviously the elements of the stripping and the pole dancing show us like Honey's career, like the character's career. But in my opinion, when she would go to the pole and do those dances to the track of music that was pumped above us, it's not that those weren't needed, but they weren't really guiding the plot for me. So again, I felt like it was just like a theater breather, and I'm like, okay, great, I'm in the strip club for a second, and now we're back to the theater piece, and we're in the, so again, it had my brain kind of volleying back and forth.
And I think, well, you're touching on something that I would say was, in my mind, something I didn't particularly love about this show, is that there was a lot of individual units of it that I'm not saying they have to necessarily advance the story, because again, that's taking that sort of like linear build towards climax approach to it, but that felt like pausing because there is much more so than Reina. Never Walk Alone has a very clear narrative, not necessarily a standard beginning, middle, and end narrative, but it is this is me. I'm giving you a non-linear autobiographical sequence of myself viewed through the prism of a night in the life of somebody with this particular career. And every time that there was, less so, I would say, with the stripping and pole dancing sequences, but certainly like anytime she changed her outfit, things kind of just ground to a halt, and there was an awful lot of dead air that didn't feel like it was being played with as this is a poignant silence that makes you feel the mundanity of being somebody who has this job, and you have to take off your boots so you can go outside for a cigarette. I think there was ways that she could have been playing with it to make a point like that, but there was a lot of parts of this show that really did feel like they were, okay, pause, I have to do a costume change, but because this is my job, I do the costume change on stage. And I think there could have been a more organic integration of plotting, not necessarily speech or narration, but making those feel like they were more part of the plot. And I would say the dancing itself, too, I get why she's doing it because it is part of the job and it's very impressive. Like, she's a very skilled dancer with very squeaky boots that make loud noise and aren't covered by the music on the pole.
That's no, but as someone who's never frequented a strip club, that sound is absolutely a thing.
Yeah, yes. Sure. So good job. I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing.
Yeah. No. But I'm going to talk about. I actually didn't know you've never been to a strip club, but I'm going to talk about how the production elements encapsulated.
How?
I don't know.
Okay, sorry. So continue. Go.
Yeah. No. I just think like what you're saying, it does make sense that you kind of were like hungry for a little bit more play space in those silent moments. But again, maybe that is directly kind of, no pun intended, but dancing with the genre fuck, right? Of like, maybe it is obviously this character's narration and non-linear autobiographical, but at the same time, maybe it's actually just the performance of the pole dancing. And we're like, it's almost like for me, like a chicken and an egg situation. Like the pole dancing itself, like the exotic dancing itself, and then the solo nonlinear narrative itself can kind of, in my opinion, be two different types of performances. And it's like using Never Walk Alone as the title. Like, are we focused on the dancing and then we just have this narration accessorizing the dancing, or are we focusing on the narration and the dancing is accessorizing the narration? Like, I think there is something to say about it because it's under the umbrella of genre fuck, the disconnect that you're explaining and feeling. I think it's justified.
Yeah, like I'm happy to concede that it is. I just, to me, it felt like a more lackluster experience, I guess.
Sure.
But I like what you're saying about, yes, is this a pole dancing show with character narration, or is it an autobiographical solo show? I don't even know about the performer. Sorry, what's her name? Julie
Phan.
Yeah, again, I don't know to what extent. Obviously, like the character has her own name that is different than her, so it's not explicitly framed as an autobiography. And I don't know anything about her or herself, and to what extent this may have been inspired by real. And it's not our place to speculate if it's not presented explicitly. But I guess, yeah, I like what you're saying about how, is this a goblet or is it two faces looking at each other? How you view this show is, I think, because we are experiencing it in a more so traditional proscenium theater setting, I think we are nudged to view it more so as one than the other. This is a theatrical venue, therefore it is a play first that has some pole dancing. If we were seeing it in a strip club, but then there's all this narration and it's like, oh, wow, this feels like, we're getting something more intimate than you.
That would have been site specific. Yeah,
that would have been a very different, interesting period that would actually maybe force us to view the field and the ground differently that way.
Fair.
I also kind of think, this is a silly thought, so bear with me, but what is it if you're taking pole dancing as a specific type of performance that usually exists in a very particular, I would say, traditionally seen as low art context. That's not me saying that it is low art, because it's obviously athleticism and dancing and very difficult to do. And I think there is an artistry to that, but it's viewed as pornographic, erotic. It's done for titillation rather than an aesthetic pleasure. And to put that into the theater setting is this kind of like Marcel Duchamp putting the urinal in the art gallery and being like, now you see this thing that you previously might have looked down upon as not true art, but what does it mean to put it in the fancy theater? The fact that this fancy theater is Buddies in Bad Times, which has this kind of sexually liberated energy, I feel like that would be very different if they did it at like a Mervish thing, or even at Stratford, which I guess Richard II kind of was a version of that. But anyway, do you have thoughts about any of that, or should we move on to other elements of this production?
We can move on to the other elements, because we were kind of, no pun intended, but dancing around the sort of ambiance and the space of this. Like you said, it is like proscenium. It's proscenium style is like how we're viewing it, but the stage space like absolutely was transformed into a strip club. And because of all of our theatrical elements, first of all, the consistent sort of like beat, like it's kind of, how do I even say this like appropriately, but like orgasmic sort of like, you can't make out the song, but there's like a constant pulse and a beat like that is present in every strip club you go to. Sometimes like if you're like in a room, or if you're like, there's just like a constant beat that sort of keeps the sort of, the pulse of the evening and sort of like the sweat of what's going around you, like in the space of things. So I just felt like that was a really lovely concurrent or like consistent thing happening. Similarly as well, the bringing in of the stage fog, sort of having that like foggy, huey, you walk into strip clubs spaces as well. Like there's usually super filtered air, and there is this sort of like hum of fog happening. And then I think, just the sort of like pinky sort of elements of like the scenic design. You had like a high top bar, you had like the lap dance room, which again, these were just like sort of standard theatrical structures, but then having this sort of like sketches of like the female body and like the use of projection in the back, sort of having different like images displayed on it too. And then the sort of when Honey goes into the pole dancing elements and the lights hued down and the music ratcheted up. And like you were talking about the squeakiness of the boots, the sort of red and violet sort of hued lighting, it very much is like, oh yeah, this is like when I went to Brass Rail or something, like, right? Like it's giving, it was giving strip club. So shout out to Joanne Kang, who's our set and props designer. And then obviously Julie Phan, who is producer, writer, content creative director, graphic designer, costume stylist. I think, all of the production team did a really good job of creating the environment for this story to be told. And then like I think you said earlier too, the little Christmas tree that's sort of added on the edge of the bar to sort of remind us that, this is Christmas Eve. The whole piece happens as Honey's sort of like 7 p.m. to like 4 a.m. shift. I just kind of wanted to add that into the space. Do you have anything else to add production-wise?
Production-wise, I feel like you did a very good coverage. And again, me not being as familiar with the type of thing that they're trying to recreate here, that I think, I did like that the set certainly divided into 3 kind of clear units. Like you have the pole on one side, the lap dance room, and then the bar in the middle. And that you could kind of really follow the story through those rooms. There is an element of horizontal storytelling, I guess, here. Especially when it starts with what is kind of a very prolonged sequence of her just sitting in her chair, which I guess is the dressing room behind the poles. And that, like, but it's on display for us. And then she begins by doing the pole dance, and you kind of wonder, is this going to be the whole show? But then because she's only using a third of the stage for what feels like a pretty long sequence, it kind of primes your brain to think there's going to be more what's going on in the rest of the space. This would be a very elaborate design to do if it was only going to be sequestered into that moment. Maybe that would be a way of fucking with genre even further, or expectations. Totally. But no, I think it was a very well set up space, very well utilized. My favorite image is that whenever she was in the lap dance room and then the client would leave and she wants to have a cigarette, she would pull an imaginary sliding door that was cued with a very good sound effect to create this image of the door moving. And then she would just poke her head out, take out a cigarette, similar to what you were saying about the smell-o-vision of it all. We were able to smell her. I assume they were herbal cigarettes, but they did have a very potent fragrance to them that we became immersed in. Just like a lot of very good individual pieces. The projections themselves, I struggle with a little bit because I'm not really sure what those were adding all the time. There was like the recurring image of like a close-up on a woman's face, certainly every time she went into the lap dance room, but it was like, maybe it was always the same woman. I'm not entirely sure, but the pose was always different. So it wasn't just creating this, now we are in this room convention. I think there's probably a visual story being told with what these faces were doing and when.
Sure.
But maybe a second viewing would kind of crystallize some of that. But I'm sitting now thinking like, did we even need all of that? Like, did it give us as much?
I agree with you as well, because I think going back to it, I was so captivated by just watching the exotic dancing side of the performance, and also so captivated with listening to the narration side of the performance. The external sort of accessory of this digitized content in the back, I'm not going to lie, like that wasn't what I was interested in watching or viewing. So I would catch it every once in a while, and I knew it was just sort of like, it was movement and adding to the piece in some shape or form. But you're right. I think if I saw this a second time, so I would pay attention to those, because I feel like there definitely is a narrative happening there,
Yeah.
but I was more interested in the liveness of it all.
Yeah, they didn't draw enough attention to themselves to make it easy to follow whatever story was going on back there, but they drew just enough attention to themselves that you could feel like you're missing something, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I think
Yeah.
the two best uses of it, in my opinion, were ones that I don't really feel like fit into that sequence that I'm describing at all. One is just in a moment where she goes outside and gets a hot dog and then has an awkward encounter with a guy who she thought looks like he goes to North Korean boarding school or whatever. But like the just having the snowfall on the back screen and the hot dog cart, like that just was a good way of differentiating the space when nothing about the set needed to move.
Definitely.
And the other one, of course, is at the very end when she talks about her bird dream of becoming a bird. We had this very interesting video sequence of visualizing the thing she's describing. Well, could it have worked just fine without that visual aid? Sure, she has very evocative imagery in her narration of it, but it's nice to have that accompaniment, I guess, that I thought must have been fun to film, having that actual creation of the bird person.
Totally. Okay. Do you think we can round out Never Walk Alone? Do you have any other final remarks?
I feel like there's one last thing I think we should mention because it hasn't come up yet, but
sure.
Asian immigrant children for second generation narrative feels like it belongs in the discussion about this show. I'm not sure what I have to say about it, which is why I've been so easily able to talk about the show just fine without it. But I feel like we would be doing a disservice to not bring up that there is an element of what your family means to you, what your relationship with your parents, her uncle, like a lot of this. North Korean boarding school kid, or however she described him, he brought up this provocative point to her about, you look like somebody whose parents would be disappointed in her. I've lived my whole life pleasing my parents, and yet I feel so empty. How do you feel? Are you happy with your choices? Have I made the wrong choice? And that question goes unanswered in the piece, but I think there is very much an exploration of that. The reason why it starts with the phone call from the mother isn't because this is a play about the daughter reconnecting with her mother, but because it has an element of family estrangement, potential for reconciliation hanging over top it, but then that gets pushed aside by, but I'm at work, I have a job to do, a job that mother presumably would not approve of. And then we hear more about how her relationship with her uncle is part of what drew her to this particular line of work and exposed her to it as a young child, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I don't have too much to say about this, but it's part of it. And I would be remiss if we didn't get into it a little.
Definitely. No. And I think just to add to all of this, like the fact that this is happening on Christmas Eve, that is very just like the traditional family holiday. So like that is kind of encapsulating the space. I don't remember if every client she sort of like mime interacts with is white, but I do know there was definitely one who was. And I think that has something to add to this as well. I think like the idea of like the male gaze, like even just performing, like, I mean, being an exotic dancer, like you every single day you're placing yourself under that male gaze. And then, like you said, it is her uncle who was a pivotal male figure in her life that sort of like introduced her to this career. And then also the sort of mimed people that she interacts with are all like male clients. So I just think there's that going on top of, like you said, too, the cultural aspect as well.
Yeah,
and again, in the spirit, exactly, in the intersections and in the spirit of Genrefuck, I think like the narration of this piece sort of blenderizes a bunch of this as well too, right? And that alone just gives us Honey. Like that's Honey's life, is this sort of concoction of
emerging out of the beehive.
Exactly. And again, there's the image like talking about with the bird, her becoming a bird. She actually says there's an ingrown hair in her arm and she's picking. And then what she picks out is like this feather. And so I also think there's like the feather representing maybe like the sort of choice of career, exotic career that she's chosen, but then like pulling that birds of a feather, like pulling that out of your arm, like your DNA. I don't know. Again, there's some symbolic imagery going on there too, that if you see this, you might have a different iteration on it as well. If you see it a second time, you might get another flavor as well. Again, I think it in the spirit of Genrefuck, it's just, this charcuterie board of a bunch of things going on with honey. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So as ending that episode on charcuterie board, this was Genrefuck. We saw both pieces that did so much with art, tipping the hat to everyone involved, the production team at large, that is Genrefuck, and then obviously each individual show. Brilliant work. That's the final installment for Buddy's season. So great job, Ted. Cheers. Cheers.
Yes, cheers, cheers.
Yes. Anything else you want to add, Ryan, before we do our sign off?
No, I think this was a really interesting season for Buddies. They haven't announced yet what next season has in store for us, but I'm looking forward to seeing how Ted continues developing his artistic vision. It kind of just occurred to me in the moment as I was saying it in the introduction to this episode that maybe I'd have to go back through the whole season in my head to see if this is the case, but it seems like each play builds like a daisy chain off of the previous one. I just think even I stopped that sequence at Born Again and Crow, but if you think about the show before that as Last Landscape, there is an environmental theme that maybe links those two, and if Last Landscape, I guess Oraculum was before that, and I'll stew on what the connection is there, and Oraculum to Roberto Zucco. Sure. It's been a great season, and I've been enjoying seeing all of it, and we've done some pretty thought-provoking reviews of this thought-provoking work that I hope will continue to stimulate our thoughts as Ted continues refining his leadership of this storied company into next year.
Amen. So again, this is Genrefuck. It is happening at Buddies and Bad Times Theatre. It's comprised of 2 pieces, Reina by Augusto Bitter, Never Walk Alone by Julie Phan, running May 21 to 31, 2025. We will pop all the information down below. Our standard sign-offs over here at the Cup. Ryan, where can friends find and follow you?
No need to find and follow me personally, but if you like me and my theater thoughts, many of them tend to live here on the Cup. That's at COH Theater on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Cup of Hemlock Theater on YouTube. Cup of Hemlock Theater podcast in all the podcast places. You're either watching or listening to this at one of those. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, do all of the things. How about you, Jill? Where can people find and follow you?
People can find and follow me in my artist Instagram account, Jillian.Robinson96. And to be honest, it is a bit of a Genrefuck, my Instagram account. I've got some model photos. We've got some covers of songs. We've got some promos for events coming up. So if you want to catch up with Jillian Robinson, tune into my account.
Maybe you'll be in next year's Genrefuck if this is an annual thing. Who knows?
I am like, there are some solo pieces that I'm wanting to write. I guess that's something I can share with our audience. I'm wanting to kind of get into the writing aspect of the craft and also dabble more with directing. So keep your eyes peeled with me trying out different tendrils of the Canadian theatrical sphere, because we wear many hats. And we will continue to wear many hats and expand and explore. Look at that. So on that note, we will take our beverages, do a final cheers. We've got lots more content coming down the line as always, folks. And believe it or not, Fringe is around the corner and we are revved and ready as a team to talk about scheduling for all of that. So keep your eyes and ears peeled, stay safe, catch all the live theater you can, and we'll see you next time here on The Cup.